How's it going out there? Global Hack Week, Rosendo from MLH here. Really happy to have everyone joining us for the upcoming live stream. How's it going? Hi, Anurag. Anyone else want to say hi? Definitely let me know in the chat. We are going live momentarily with a couple of developer advocates from the Wix team. They're going to be showing you how to get started quickly with Velo, which means you're going to be building a Wix website using the Velo developer mode. And if you haven't registered for this workshop yet, I'm going to drop the link in the chat for y'all. Get registered. Make sure you check in. Make sure you get points and recognition for being here today. Yeah, Chow, Blaze Killer, Monica. I don't know what it's a waving emoji. That's what's up. How you doing? And Happy New Year to you, SKB 2021. Maybe time to change your name to SKB 2023. I don't know. Happy New Year though. I appreciate you. Really glad to see everyone once again. I'm really excited to introduce you to two of the folks that I've been working with on the Wix side. I'm sure you're well aware of what Wix is at this point if you've been following along with our hackathon season. You might know that there's a best use of Velo by Wix prize category at a lot of the MLH hackathons. So definitely this is going to be something that is going to improve your chances at winning that prize category. And it's just in general a great tool to know and to learn, because it makes building front ends and even building full stack applications really easy. But enough from me. I won't tell you too much about it because we have two experts that are going to be joining us today by the name of Anthony and Thomas. And with that said, I'll go ahead and plop them on the stream for y'all. Hi, Anthony. Hi, Thomas.
Hey there, Rosendo. How's it going?
Going well. It's going well. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and leave y'all to it. And I hope everyone enjoys the stream. All right.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so just quick introductions. My name's Anthony. I'm a developer advocate at Wix, working on Velo, and I'll explain what both of those things are in a second. Been doing this quite a while, so yeah, happy to walk you through this to-do workshop that we put together. And Thomas, if you want to intro yourself.
So, hello everyone, my name is Thomas. I've been at Wix for a year. I'm also a developer advocate. And a year ago, I got a chance to, during my first time with Velo, also build what we're going to do today. So I think it's going to be a great learning opportunity for you all. And I'm going to try to be as helpful as I can in the chat to answer any questions that you guys have. So if you're stuck, you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I'll be on Twitch answering questions. So thank you, and without further ado, here's what we're going to do today.
Awesome. And yeah, I see in the chat, Blaze Killer 8 wanted to learn Wix anyways, so very happy to have you here. Actually, let me show you what we're going to be talking about. But first, just want to talk a little bit about, what is Wix, what is Velo? Wix, as you might know, is a platform for building websites. You get this nice drag and drop interface. You get, at least in Editor X, one of our options for editors, you get to collaborate with multiple users. You get quite a lot of features within Wix. But then, you would normally, with those types of editors, you would hit a limit where you want to do a bit more, but you can without writing your own code. That's where Velo comes in. Velo is essentially, you can write JavaScript on the front end and back end for your Wix sites, and you can do all the basic things you would expect to be able to do. You can handle data collections, you can schedule jobs, you can do all sorts of fun things with Velo and Wix. And today we're going to walk through some of those. So that's what we're going to get started on here. And so what we have here, and this is a workshop that you can work through yourself too after the call. So if there's anything you want to try again, or you want to try putting it together completely by yourself instead of watching me do it, then you can go ahead, do that by clicking on the template here, and it's going to open up a new page that's going to look something like this, where you're going to have everything nice and laid out. And this is basically, your to-do application. Like, you've designed it, you've laid it out in Wix, but some of the connectivity, some of the things you want to do require a tool like Velo. So that's what we're going to be working through. So I'm just going to move this over here a little bit. Yeah, and we're going to get started. First, I want to mention a couple ideas or concepts that we're going to be talking about that are kind of unique to Velo and Wix. Not really super unique. They have equivalencies in a lot of other things that you might be doing, but essentially we have collections, which are, you can think of as your database, We have data sets, which is a way to interface with your data collections so that you can basically get data that you're going to then present to a user. And then we have something called repeaters, which are a way to take a set of data, define the elements that make up each essentially row of that data as to how it should display in a UI, and then repeat it throughout each and every row that you want to display. So that's a little bit about Wix and Velo, but these things will become a little more clear as we work through this. So first thing we're going to do is turn on developer mode. So right here, just enable developer mode. And also, Thomas, if there are any questions while this goes on, feel free to shout them out to me if you think they're important. So if not, we'll also just answer questions at the end if you want to save yours to the end. Either one's fine by me. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually create a database. We're not even going to write any code yet. So we're going to come over here to our little Velo menu and click on the databases tab. And then we're going to go to my collections and we're going to click create collection. So hit get started. And this collection, we want to store our to-do items. So we're going to type in to-do tasks as the name of it, and we're going to hit create. And then we're going to get a collection that is actually pre-filled. This shouldn't be here, so I'm just going to delete it for a moment, at least for explanation purposes. Every single collection you make is going to have its own title column to start with. So we'll leave that, and we're actually going to end up using it. And then we're also going to want to, with our to-do tasks, we're going to want to check whether or not they're done. People are going to want to tick them off. So we'll make that field right now, because that's a pretty common thing. We'll call it completed. So you've got all sorts of types of fields that you can do. You know, you've got text, images, Boolean states, rich content, a whole bunch of data that you can store within your data collections. Really quite nice. Then we're going to add a few items, and we'll say we're going to just add 2 items so that this way we have things that when we're displaying and hooking things up, we can kind of see that it's working. So we'll say take out the trash, and we'll add another item, you know, walk the dog. So we'll actually go ahead and tick off one of these to kind of mark it as completed. And then the last thing we're going to do before we close out of here is we're going to set our permissions on this data, because obviously we don't want the whole world being able to see with and interact with our own to-do tasks. We want each user of our website to have their own set. So we'll go over to permissions and privacy, and we're going to set some settings here. So what we'll do is we'll set a lot of these to be site member author. So we're going to set view, delete, and update to site member author. What that means, as you can see right here, is it's a user that's signed in who's added content to the collection. And then what we're also going to do for adding content is we're going to say site member. You can't add content to this collection unless you're logged in. So the workflow there then is somebody comes, logs into your website, is a site member now, can add content to the collection. Any of that content that they specifically add to the collection, they can then, you know, view, delete, and update. So that's how we set our permissions there. So now that we've got our permission set up and our database set up, what we're going to do is actually want to present this data on the page. So what you'll see here is we have a repeater that we've already set up ready to go, but we need to connect it to some data. What you would normally do in the Wix editor is you would click add elements and you would go ahead to list and you would find your repeaters here and use those, but we've preset this up so it's nice and easy to do. So we'll click connect data, and now we're going to connect to a data set. That's that concept I was talking about before, where essentially a data set is a way to get data from your data collection into a form that is displayable for in your repeater so that your users can see it. So the collection we'll want to be using, of course, is to-do tasks that we just set up, and we'll just call it to-do tasks data set. Doesn't really matter. And then you'll see here that these elements as they're highlighting as on the page as I hover over them, can actually be connected now to data through this data set. So vector art, we're not going to worry about, but text, we want to go ahead and connect, and text will connect that to the title from our data. And then, and you can see they've updated already. And then the switch status, we're also going to connect, and we're going to want to connect that to the completed marker. So you'll see that also updated right there. And then there's one more thing to do with our data set, and that is to make sure it is read and write. So you'll see this little data set object that appears. That's the one we just created in that previous dialog. You can go to settings, and you can go to mode, read and write. And yeah, that's about it for getting this hooked up. So now we're going to start hopping into actually writing some code. But as you can see here, we've actually already gone through quite a bit we've accomplished quite a bit without even having had to write a line of code, which is nice because it did a lot of stuff for us. And I'm just checking to see if there's any questions here. Nope, no questions at the moment. Awesome. So let's start writing some code. So for each and every page you're going to have a place where you can write code. You're also going to have a master page.js, which is a JavaScript file that runs on every single page that loads. We won't be using that today. And you have some other stuff, some of which we'll be going into later. So first things first, we're going to do some imports. I'm going to be copying and pasting code because we have just about an hour to do this. And it makes everything a lot quicker, but don't worry, I'll be explaining everything as we go through this. So we're going to import some data. And the one bit of code that I am going to write is setting up the onReady function. And what we've done here, though, at the top is we're importing Wix data. This is going to let us query and update our actual data set, the to-do tasks data collection. Then I've just defined a couple constants, the to-do collection, which we're calling to-do tasks. That's the data collection that we described over here in the databases, and data set. That's the ID for the data set element over here that we were talking about before. Then we have our w.onReady. This is a very useful function. Basically, it says run the code that's in here whenever the page is ready. So a lot of times you want to wait for your page to be ready before you start running code, and that's what that's going to be about. But now we're going to be adding a task we're going to be adding the ability to add a task, and we're going to be using this task input element up here in order to do that. So the first thing we'll do is we'll define how to add a task. And let's talk a little bit about it. So this is how we add a task, right? We go and get our task title, which again, you can see we're pulling it from task input. And we're grabbing the value that's written in there. So whenever somebody types in here, that becomes the .value property. And then after we've grabbed it, we're going to clear it out because we want it to be clear next time for our users. And we also want to make sure that the task title that we grabbed is not just merely empty, because we don't want to add empty to-dos into our database. That doesn't make much sense. And so that's just a little bit of prep work. Then what we're going to do is we're going to assemble a new object that we're going to want to insert into our database. You can see that it's title and completed here. Just like in our database, we'll go back over there really quickly. You can see we have title, which if you come over here, has the field key title, and completed over here, field key completed. So that's how those things line up. It's not the title you see up here at the top, it's the field key that's a property on that column. So we assemble those, and obviously every single task always starts off not completed. Oh, I should save my work, but I'm not going to right yet just because. Anyway, now what we'll do is we'll want to insert that data into the collection. So we'll just await Wix data.insert, give it the name of our to-do collection and the task that we want to insert. And that's all you need to do to insert data. We're using await here just because we want to wait for this to finish before we refresh our data set. So what'll happen from that is, user inserts it, it gets stored in our data collection, refreshes our data set on the page. And now that we've defined it, though, as you can see, we've not actually used add new task. So we're going to define that in our onReady with a couple of event handlers. So I'll go ahead and paste them in here. We're just defining two. We're going to do add task button.onClick. So when this button gets clicked, you can see it's called add task button. And we're going to call add new task. And then also on task input itself, if somebody hits the enter key, then we also want to add a new task. So I'll hit preview now. And we can say a new task, and I'll hit enter, and it works. And testing, and I'll click the button, and it works. Wonderful. So as you can see, really easy to hook stuff up here. Really easy to interface with your UI and get everything ready to go. So now that we've done that, one of the next things you want to do after you've added a task to a to-do list is you eventually want to complete it, unless you're like me and you like to slack off a lot. So what we'll do here is we'll add another event, or we'll add another function. And so what we're going to do with this function here is we're going to handle people changing their switches. So like this isn't hooked up, so I can actually show you. But if you go to preview right now, and I have these new tasks, they exist in the database. But if I tick this here, testing and a new task in our database you would imagine actually get marked, but that's not actually what happens. They are in the database, but they are not marked completed because we need to hook up that functionality for the switch that we have over here. And so what we'll do there is kind of a similar thing where we're going to define how to do that. So the way we would do that is we would get the item. This is similar to W. So if you see W here, this is how you know you're accessing an element. Like if you see W task input here, we're accessing the task input element. But in repeaters, what happens is you have multiples of these elements. For example, you have this switch, this switch, this switch. Which one is it? The way to get the actual switch from the event that was fired is to use w.at, and you pass it the event context. That gives this function the context on which switch it is, and then item becomes this constant we've defined here becomes that item. And so through that, now I can know for exactly which item, say I click this one, that when I'm asking for the task text, I'm getting the task text for this item. And when I'm asking for this completed switch, I'm getting the completed switch for this item, assuming I've clicked that one. And so that's how that works. The other thing we're going to want to grab, which is very important, because now we're going to be updating a row in our data collection, is we're going to want to grab the item ID for that item, because this is how, when we go to update our data collection, we will be able to Wix data will be able to reference it. So actually, let me just show you how that works. So if we come over to do tests and open the collection, you saw two fields over here before, but we actually have several more. And they are hidden behind manage fields. So we'll go to manage fields, and you'll see there's an ID field, there's a created date, updated date, and owner. These are some useful fields for Wix, both on the back end and for you to kind of manage and keep track of things. Like, for example, when we set those permissions before, and only the site member author can delete these rows, that's saying, oh, there's going to be a check on the back end that this owner is the owner. Everybody gets a unique ID. And same for the rows. Every row gets a unique ID, and those unique IDs are how we know what we're going to update. So that's why it's important to do that, because if you called update and you didn't give it a unique ID, it would say that this item doesn't exist. So that's that. Then we reconstruct our updated item. So we give it the ID, the title, and its completed status, which will be checked or unchecked. And then we go ahead and update. And one important thing to keep in mind when you're working on your own projects on Wix is when you call wix.update, you need to make sure you specify all the columns for that item that you want data to persist. Because, for example, if I had dropped out title, you might expect that it would just update completed with the status and title would be left alone, but title will actually go null. So that's why it's important when calling Wix data.update to make sure that you've included all the information you want. So again, we'll just await it like we did before, and then we'll refresh our data set. We also have a little bit of code commented out, but we're going to handle that later. And then, yeah, really simple. Just like before, we're going to go ahead and put in our little event handler. And there it is. It's not too much code to get this all working. So we'll go ahead and click preview again. We'll go tick off testing and add a new task. And now those should be firing events when I do that. And we'll see it over here in the collection. And there you go, they're marked completed. And so they're going to persist. So if I go back to preview, we're going to see them marked again. One other thing to keep in mind too, and this is just in general, whenever you're programming with events, always take a moment to actually look and make sure that you're using the right event. So completed switch, for example, or any switch, has an on-change event. It also has an on-click event. And you might think, well, if the user clicks a element, then it's going to change it because that's the nature of the switch. That's what it does. So I'm going to handle on-click events. That wouldn't be the right place to put it. There is a much more specific and better place to put it, which is on change. So just whenever you're working through this, Wix has I would say a really, really good, possibly excellent set of documentation. I'm not making that up because I work for them. This is probably in my top 5 favorite documentations ever. I guess I have several sets of documentation that I like, but every single element, every single type of element is all within the documentation. So you can go to any of them and check out all the events and all that fun stuff. Same for anything you're going to import, Wix data, Wix data set, everything that you need to use to build almost any website you want is probably going to be here and is going to be documented pretty well. So that's that. Let's move on to our next step. Because now we've basically got really, truly, in 15, 20 minutes, we've implemented the core functionality of a to-do list. If we wanted to, we could say, hey, I did my to-do list, it is done. But, we've got this nice little editor and we can build things pretty fast. So let's do a couple other nice things to do, some interesting things to do. So as you saw before, I had a little bit of code commented out, which gets an incomplete to-do count. And that's this count up here. It's currently not hooked up, but we're going to want to hook it up and make sure it updates. So here we have our function, get incomplete to-do count. Now we're going to do a Wix data query. So we'll call Wix data, and then we'll say .query and give it the name of the collection, which is our to-do collection. And then they're incompleted. So, you have .eq, you have greater than, less than, you have quite a lot of little functions. I'll actually come back over here to our API reference and point it out to you in just a second. There it goes. Over here, you've got ends and ors. You have less than. You can say if something is empty or not. Ends with, contains, between, all the typical query stuff that you would do is all right there. So ours is a pretty simple query, but you can construct much more advanced queries. So if you wanted to, do something with date, you could do that type of thing. And then we have our count. So we'll say, because we don't really, for this query, we don't want the items themselves. We just want the count of the items. So we'll call .count and we'll tell it consistent read true. This is an important thing to do here and I'll explain why. So the reason we would do this here is when you build your Wix website, you get your data collection, and to you, it looks as if it's like one single data collection. But what Wix does, obviously, is replicates it across servers in different geolocations so that sites respond nice and speedy no matter where you are in the world. And that replication takes a little bit of time. So if you go and click the switch, that replication and it goes and it up tells the database, hey, let's update, and then the code continues. It's not going to wait for all of that replication to happen. It's simply going to send it to the primary database, the first database that it hits, and then it's going to get on with its life and not worry about the secondary databases that are going to update over the next few seconds. But that's next few seconds is a long time to wait, so we don't want to wait for that to happen. So here it is a little bit of a performance penalty, but it works out a lot better for us in terms of the user experience here, because when somebody clicks something to mark it complete, we want to get the most recent count. And that's the way we do that, because we'll go and just ask the primary database what's the most recent count. It will have the most up-to-date count before all that replication happens. So that's why we do that here. So we do that, and then once this function returns, because all the Wix data queries are promises, we're going to go ahead and take the text. We're going to go ahead and set this text on active test count to be the count of items left, and then we're going to use show here to just make a nice little animation to display it. And so we'll go ahead and, oh, actually, no, we will not go ahead and do that yet. I need to hook that up. So hooking that up will take a little bit more code this time, and that's because we're going to be hooking it up in a few different places. So firstly, we're going to go ahead and define an init function, and I'll explain why we're doing this. Again, there's some commented code here right now, but don't worry, we'll get to that later. It'll be fun. When your page loads, you want to get your incomplete to do count. And that's great. But the other time when you want to get your incomplete to do count and maybe do some other setup stuff related to your specific user is when they log in. So, Wix websites are built to modern standards. So a user logging into your website does not trigger a page refresh. So that's why it's important to make sure to compensate for this. So what we're going to do is a fairly common pattern of where we create an initialization function, and then we pass it. We call it in our onReady function, and we also call it in a onLogin handler. And I just typed that in the wrong function. So we're going to come back up here. There we go. Okay. I don't know why I'm typing it. I got code of that I could copy and paste. So first, what we need is to import authentication. This way, we'll have a way to get to that onLogin event. So that's stored there. And then we're going to modify our onReady. I've already partly modified it a little bit, so maybe I'll be a little less lazy and type it out. onLogin init. There we go. This is a very common pattern, and it's probably something you want to do pretty typically. I'm also going to move this up just because I like to have my init, really close to my onReady. It's good form to have your code well formatted. Honestly, if I was doing this myself for building an actual site, I would probably leverage the fact that I have public and backend code, and I could actually add public JavaScript files here that I could then import up here and go ahead and use them like that. There's a whole bunch of flexibility here. This is just dialed down a little bit for ease of demonstration. So that is great. And yeah, let's go ahead and now we'll be, what we'll be doing. Oh yeah, the other thing we want to do is we'll want to call our get incomplete count in the other case. So there are three cases: onLogin, when the page renders, and also when the status of an item is updated. So when a switch is changed, because that obviously is going to affect your incomplete count. So I think we've set everything up in the right places. And what you'll see here is we'll come over to preview, and it should be updated. Oh, there it goes. Sorry, preview just takes a second sometimes to render properly. My on-ready probably didn't fire yet. So yeah, there it is. We can go ahead and check them or uncheck them, and our items all update. So perfect. Now you'll notice too, we have another nice little piece of UI interaction for our users here. And this is our filter radio group. So what our filter radio group will do is, or will do once we hook it up, is allow people to filter their items so that they can see when they're completed or when they're active, and really focus in on them. So for example, obviously we'll hook this up later, but if your user wants to keep a running to-do list, only wants to see the active ones, and when they tick them off, they want them to go away and only see the active ones because they've selected active, we want them to be able to do such things. So we're going to handle that again pretty much in a very similar way. First, we're going to define our function. And our function here is called setDataSetFilter. So it'll handle when an event is fired, and we'll go for the event.target.value. What that basically means, as in all events, both in Wix and pretty much any other event-driven development you're going to ever do in your life, you'll get event.target, and so your event actually gives you the item that is firing. So in that case, that target here, when we click one of these radio buttons, is going to end up being filter radio group. And filter radio group has a .value that you can see over here in manage choices for each of the things that somebody selects. So here we have all tests, the value is the same, all tests, and so on. You can actually customize those, like you can come in and edit the value. I'm not going to, but you could set it to whatever you want. If you want these to be 1, 2, and 3, you could do such a thing. So that's that. So that's that. And then we'll have our switch down here. We'll have the case completed, have the case for active, and have our default case. That will just fall through if neither of these are ticked. So by default, the all test button is the default. You could define it separately, but it's cleaner code and kind of nicer to do it this way, and actually easier to expand upon later, though I actually don't think in this case you could expand on this functionality very much. So what we'll do here, though, is we'll define our filter. So completed, this is very similar to the Wix data.query, except now we're providing a filter to our data set. So we'll call Wix data.filter, and we'll say when an item is equal to true, those are the ones we want to see, or when an item is equal to false, as far as their completed status, those are the ones we want to see. So it'll define that, and then it'll set the filter on the data set. And so then the last thing we just need to do there is, like before, we hook up our event handler. So as you've probably gotten used to by now, we come up to our w.onReady and hook up our event handler. And so now we'll go ahead to preview. And if we only wanted to see completed, we'll only see completed. And let me untick a few of these. And if we only wanted to see active, we'll only see active. And then the nice thing too is that whenever we mark things off, they'll actually disappear because the data set is refreshing. So back here, another nice reason to make sure to reset your data, refresh your data set when things change. Let's ignore that for right now because that's for the end when I publish. Wix is very good about reminding you to save your work, as I should be saving my work right now, but it would ruin my demonstration flow here. So we're not going to do that yet. We're going to risk it all on not saving our data, or not saving our code for about an hour. Anyway, yeah, that's because whenever the switch is changing, the data set is also refreshing, which is great. You're getting when you code things properly and you code things well, you get a lot of niceties out of it. And sometimes that might take time. You're not going to code it well or perfect the first time through. When I was, working on the revision for this workshop, I can tell you I certainly did not have everything perfect the first time through. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but especially if you're new to programming, I feel like this is important to understand, is the code that you are seeing that I've written here. I have a lot of experience writing code, and then on top of it, I have practiced writing this code, and I have worked through and thought about this code a lot. I've written it one day, gone to sleep, woken up, come in, improved it, and I've done that a couple times. So when you do these things yourself, don't get too hard on yourself if it doesn't look perfect, if you've done things in the wrong way, because there were things about this code that were also done in the wrong way. But if I did that for you right now, I would be wasting your time. So in trying not to waste your time, I've tried to write this code as well as I possibly can. So yeah, that is that. Sometimes I like to joke about being lazy, but I'm not always lazy when it comes to improving my code. I really like clean code, and I really like doing my job well. So yeah. Anyway, now we're going to want to clear our completed tasks. I've just realized that the code might be a little too small for everybody, so hopefully it hasn't been, and hopefully nobody's been complaining in chat. Nope, nobody's been complaining so far, so that's great. Yeah, so let's go ahead and hook up our next thing. We'll go ahead and check out clear completed over here, which is our completed button. And this is going to be a fun one because we want to be able to delete a bunch of stuff from our data collection all at once. So whenever something is ticked off and marked completed, those will get deleted. The one thing about that, though, is you don't want your user to be, this is like a dangerous action for your user to be doing, right? So you want to make sure your user is actually, agreeing to this. So what you're going to do is you're going to ask the user to confirm. And I'm going to show you how we would do that in the Wix and Velo way now. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use something called a lightbox. Now, a lightbox is a little modal type of dialog that will pop over a screen. It's not a pop-up. It just renders right over the page. And this is the lightbox that we're going to be hooking up, essentially, here. First, we're going to write some code on the home page, but that's what it is. So, yeah, in order to do that, we'll go ahead and define a new function, as we've been doing. For each and everything that you ever do, it's always good to define it as a new function. It's really bad to start, modifying, putting this code in your w.onReady or elsewhere. Discrete tasks should all be in their own function, obviously. So here's our clear completed tasks function. And we're not going to call it yet, but let's talk about how it's defined. So we're going to go ahead and do another Wix data query. And this time we're going to want to find ones where their completed status are true. You might notice here, like in this finds, for example, that we haven't done that consistent read thing that we did before. And that's because we're expecting there to be a little bit of time between when somebody clicks the clear completed button here and when they have last marked an item completed. Like if that's been a few seconds, we probably don't have to worry about, this race condition where data hasn't propagated to every single database yet. So in that case, we're going to improve our performance a little bit by doing it this way and not doing that consistent read true. And this is like just something when you're building your own applications or your own websites on Wix that, to think about is when you'll do it, when you won't do it. So that's that. So every query too, we always call .find at the end, and that tells, that's basically says to execute the query. We'll get back a promise, so we'll await it, and then what we'll want to eventually do is we'll bulk remove the items And bulk remove here takes an array that's just a list of IDs. We talked about them before in the databases. Over here in to do tasks, we have these IDs, and we'll be giving that function a list of the ones that we want to go away. But the query itself is going to give us the full set of items. So what we'll do is we'll do a little bit of a little map. If you're not familiar with map and other kind of functional Lambda style programming in JavaScript, this is a very useful type of function. I would say map is probably the most useful for me, at least in my day-to-day work. But something really interesting to read about. What maps is basically doing is it's saying, for each item in this collection, run this function. And our function is really simple. Our function takes the item and just returns the item ID. And then it puts that item ID back into the array. So essentially, that's literally all we're doing here is we're saying, hey, this is a function, takes the item, returns the item ID, gives it back to you, though, as that array in the same order as it was before. It's just iterating over each item in that array. So yeah, map, really, really cool function. You can do quite a lot of fun things with it. You can replace a lot of other loops with maps. So not really about Wix or Velo, but I am a big fan of mapping over things whenever possible. So anyway, then we pass that to Wix data. We do the bulk remove. It removes them, and we refresh our data set again. So that's what we want to do. And now we'll want to hook up our event handler. But our event handler this time is going to be just a tad more verbose than the event handlers that we've had over here. It's not going to be a single neat line of code, no matter how much I would like it. So we'll paste in our event handler, and we also have to go ahead and import Wix window. So we'll do that. And Wix window essentially lets us interface with a lot of things with our windows. Like I mentioned earlier, you can go to the docs and learn about everything that it does. One thing that it does is it handles lightboxes. So Wix window.open lightbox, and then we're going to open the lightbox, which is the name clear confirmation. And we specified it here. It's the same as this title over here. And what you'll notice here, though, is that we're actually assigning a variable to the result of Wix window.open lightbox, but all it does is open the lightbox. So how does that work? Well, how that works is lightboxes can both receive information from our page. So this page code for home here can actually send information to the lightbox if it needs to, if there's a case where you want to, and it can receive information back from the lightbox. So the way it would send it, though we don't have anything to send, is you would provide an extra argument and send some data on over, and then you can take the context within the lightbox and do stuff. Again, Wix window or the Velo API reference is a great place to go looking for this stuff. You'll find out how to do all that in there if you ever need to. Then the other thing is open lightboxes can return data as well. So now we'll head over to our lightbox and hook up its own code. So lightboxes work just like any other page. They have their ability to run their own code. They have their own onReady functions. They are essentially the same as pages, only they've popped over another page. They're just rendering on top. So then we're going to hook up our two buttons here for clear and cancel. We'll import Wix window again because we need it. And then what we'll do is when the clear button is clicked, we'll call lightbox.close and we'll pass in the object true. JavaScript, everything's an object. Just because this is a Boolean here that I'm returning to the home page because we need to use that Boolean to decide on what we're going to do. It doesn't need to be a Boolean. It can be, a full-fledged object. So it could be something like this. But that's not something that we want to do. What we just want to do is pass back true or false, depending on which of these buttons are clicked. And that's really it for our lightbox. Very simple. So then once So this code will basically wait. And then once this promise from Open Lightbox resolves, we'll get the confirm status. And if it's true, we'll go ahead and call clear completed tasks. So we'll go check that out now too. And we will untick a couple, but say these 2 tests, they're completed. I want to clear them. I'll call clear completed. It'll say, hey, are you sure? I'll say yes, and then they'll go away. And then we can, add more tasks if we want. And if I mark it completed, same thing here, clear completed, and it goes away. Great. So we have all of our both core and extra functionality for our to-do list done. There's other stuff you can do as well. One last thing I want to show you though, this is a slightly contrived example, but you can imagine situations where maybe you want to periodically email somebody their to-do list or that type of thing. But some of this code, like their browser isn't going to be open. So how do you handle these cases? Or you'll have things like API keys that you can't show to the user. So how do you handle these cases? Wix and Velo provide a very great way to do that, a very easy way to do that, and that is with backend web modules. So what you would do is you would come over to your public and backend tab, click on this little plus button here and create new web module. I have a file already created. It's called motivation.jsw. The W tells Wix and Velo that it's a web module and to go ahead and treat it as such. And essentially what that means is you can go ahead and define functions on the back end that are going to run on servers operated by Wix. And they're going to just, everything will run, it'll run in the back end rather than within the user's web browser. The other nice thing about these two is you don't have to think anything about any sort of, authentication or making sure the right user is coming through and all of that. All of that is handled for you automatically, which is pretty great. So basically, we're just going to, after we finish defining this function, import it on our homepage and run it, and that's it. So we have get quote here. And basically what we want to do here is on the front of our page at the top, we will have a quote displayed. And so these are some quotes that we'll display. We'll pick one at random and return it. So you can also on the back end debug these like that. You can go ahead and click run, and you can actually run that code independently and see what it does. So really great way to test your backend code, just something to be aware of, but we won't go into that right now. Okay, so we did that. Now we'll come back over to our homepage. I'll type out a little bit of code, why not? We'll say import, and what we're going to be importing is our get quote function, and we'll import it from our backend / motivation.jsw. And then we can go ahead and use that. You'll notice our init function earlier had that little bit of code commented out. And this is just a comment, so we don't need to uncomment that. So what we'll do here is basically define how to display that quote. One other thing that Wix does for you, which is great, is it pre-renders your pages normally before they reach your users. That's actually something you can control a lot here. It's called caching. A lot of service providers will do this. Wix does it as well. If you were to go to your home page, click settings, under page info, go to advanced settings. Obviously, you should only change this if you truly know what you're doing. You can actually manually control caching for the page, basically how long until the page expires. Wix is basically doing a lot of, it's doing a lot of very helpful guesswork as to when your user's page has gone stale, right? So Wix, for example, knows when your user's data collection is updated. So, maybe on the next render, we have to reload the page, re-render it for them. But other times, if it hasn't updated, if nothing's really changed, and the expiration time for that page also hasn't passed, we'll just display the pre-rendered one. So that's great. But sometimes what you might notice is you might do things where you're getting a bit of data that is, um, that, for example, in getQuote is random. And what you'll see is if you didn't do what I'm doing here, which is checking to see what environment we're rendering in, whether we're rendering in the browser or on the server, what you'll see is you'll see the pre-rendered page with maybe old data or different data. And then your page will go ahead and start rendering on the user's end. And so we'll see one quote very briefly that's been pre-rendered by the Wix servers, and then another quote that that was just rendered in your browser locally, because get quote is something that the Wix backend doesn't have any insight into. It doesn't know when new ones are coming in or not, like it would with your data collection. So when you're doing things like that, things that Wix obviously isn't going to be aware of, that's kind of when you start to see these issues and want to start considering making sure that things are rendering either in the browser or on the back end, depending on what your requirements are. It's very helpful though to have that caching, because that means again that the page is going to load faster and render faster for your users. Generally a very good thing. Just here we avoid it. So that was a very long-winded explanation, but yeah. Anyway, we'll then call getQuote, which is just calling that backend function that we defined over there, and then we'll do float again to display it. So click preview, and what you'll see is it comes up with a quote, and then it'll actually be easier if we just go ahead and deploy this. So once your website is ready, you can go ahead and click publish. You can you can just host websites for free on Wix, or a paid plan. You can get your own customized domain name. But here we'll just say, this is my to-do list, and we'll click save. So it'll be at anthonyl5.wixsite.com/my to-do list. Save and continue. It'll save for a second. And now, the site is saved. Now we actually want to publish. This happens the first time you go to publish because we haven't published yet. I'll click publish now, and then I'll go ahead and view site, and you'll see it loads. It's pulled in the little bit of code here. And what you'll notice too is I don't have any tasks. That's because I'm not logged in, and potentially also, one sec. Actually, let me just log in. And now that I'm logged in, you'll see my tasks are here, and I can go ahead and use them as I normally would. And I can add new tasks, which one of yours should be, try out Velo and Wix. I said a lot. So if there are any questions that anybody has, you can ask here. You can ask in our Discord channel. We have a pretty big and active Discord. Let me get the invite link up really quick. It is discord.gg/devs-on-wix. Very active, full of users. It's a great place to get help, to ask questions. So if there's ever anything you need an answer for, oh, sorry, it popped up my Discord app. Let me show you so you can actually see. I'm just going to share. Anyway, just head over to discord.gg/devs-on-wix, and you can see for yourself that there's a bunch of people there who would be happy to help you if you have any questions while you're working through developing Wix and Velo code. So yeah, that's basically it. Again, thank you all so much for joining, for listening to me ramble on about code and all that fun stuff for an hour. And yeah, I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Anthony. Very illuminating workshop there. I'm sure everyone that was watching is now well equipped to kind of tackle a lot of the challenges that we'll be doing throughout the week. Thank you again, Anthony. For those of you tuning in, make sure you check out today's Wix challenge. It's going to challenge you to use a third-party API on your Wix website using Velo. So that's going to be exciting. But yeah, I mean, that being said, thanks again for joining us, Anthony. I won't keep you any longer than I need to. Definitely join the Wix Discord. And if you have other questions, you can also ask on the Wix channel on the MLH Discord for Global Hack Week in particular. Outside of that, stay tuned because we have our daily stream coming up. And we're going to be taking you through all of the updates for day 3 of Global Hack Week. So once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome.
And we will see you soon.
Thanks so much, Rosendo. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye, all.
Bye.